The birth and beginning of Muhammad's life. As we have seen, therefore, idolatry was the rule, not the exception in the ancient Near East. But Israel was the one nation that advocated monotheism, even though so many of its people would fall away to idolatry at various times. And it was out of this idolatrous culture that the Arab peoples emerged, of whom Muhammad was a descendant. This, in essence, was the background out of which Islam emerged in the 7th century AD with one addition, and that was the presence of Christianity. However, that presence was integral to Islam's development because at the very core of Islamic doctrine and teaching is an absolutely antithetical view of salvation in every way from that presented in the gospel. We've already been over that, and we've looked at that fairly thoroughly. In fact, one might say that Islam is the quintessential embodiment. That means it is the best, it is the highest. You can't get anything that more adequately represents its opposite of Antichrist teaching in the same way as the teachings of the ancient Sumerians and the proclamation of Nimrod. Let us build a tower and let us build a name for ourselves, meaning over against the name of the Lord. Okay? So what we saw with the ancient Sumerians and their teaching, their self-deification of themselves, representing these various gods, what Nimrod was following what Nimrod did here in Genesis 11:4. All of this may be seen as anti-God and anti-Christ. Now, when the Apostle John wrote about the spirit of the Antichrist in 1 John chapter 4, you must understand that the spirit of the Antichrist has been here from the beginning of the fall of Satan. We don't have a time to go into the religions of the ancient Near East, but one of the very fascinating things is that in ancient Egyptian teaching and such, they have a trinity too, but that trinity is a very cultic type of a thing, and it's centered in the Pharaoh. It's centered in what's called Ma'at, or this anointing, where he would have knowledge, wisdom, and insight. That was basically their trinity. And I never forget one time I encountered this woman who was saying everything in the Bible is just borrowed from some other place, and we got into this big discussion about that, and basically God gave me enough wisdom to kind of dismantle what she said. But you know, I've always discovered this: when you're dealing with somebody that's not really wanting the truth, and you begin to kind of tear away their foundation or whatever it is, then what's the next thing they're going to do? Huh? Angry. Who are they going to get angry at? They're going to attack you and cuss you and everything else, and so that's exactly what happened. But anyway, the spirit of the Antichrist has been here from the fall of Satan till now, and will be until Jesus returns. And that's what's important for you to understand and grasp. You must see that. Everything that we've given a cursory overview of what went on in the Old Testament, but that's what it was all about. It's always been that conflict, always. All right. Thus, from the very beginning until now, Satan has always had his counterfeit to challenge the message and proclamation of our true God and Savior. That is a gross understatement. He always has, he always will until Jesus returns. And this is what you and I must. We've been blessed in this country. But now we see the enemy through so many different things: secular humanism, Marxism, the radical homosexual agenda, but basically trying to set aside the gospel and deify man. That's what this is all about. All right, next please. It is believed that Muhammad was born in Mecca in the year 570 AD. Muhammad's father died before he was born, and he was at first under the care of his grandfather, and then, after both his mother and grandfather died, his uncle assumed the responsibility of caring for and raising Muhammad. Muhammad's uncle was a merchant and trader, and Muhammad would go along with him. On one such trip to Syria around 595, he being 25 years of age, Muhammad met a woman named Khadijah, who was 40 years old, and she proposed marriage, and Muhammad accepted. Muhammad did not take another wife until after her death in 619. which meant he was how old then? 49 years old. And we're going to see some interesting things that took place after that. Now, I didn't mean to go there. Let me look. Yeah, there we go. Now, here's what's fascinating about this. Now, this woman was 15 years older than he was, and she already had another son by a previous marriage. Now, keep that in mind, because later when we get into some of the teachings and stuff of the Quran and things that Muhammad did, I told you about witnessing to those two Muslim gentlemen from Kuwait. They were basically Kuwaiti government officials. They were over there. They were accountants, and they were checking out some irregularities in the Kuwaiti ambassador and stuff, money things. So anyway, I just started sharing with them 4 nights in a row. 4 nights in a row. The first 3 nights, I was just befriending them. Listen, Muslims are very insecure people. They've been brainwashed. You are not going to go there and just intellectually blow them away. Are you with me? Even though they may see they're wrong, they're emotional. The fears and the insecurity is so great. It is so great that they will shut down. You've lost the argument already. So you have to befriend them. You have to share with them. And that's what I did. Showed interest in what they were doing. We just started talking. And they were telling me stuff, and I'm acting like I'm Danny Dumb. Are you with me? But I don't know squat. Because if you come across like you know more than they do, what's going to happen to what's going to happen in their mind mentally and emotionally? Boom, the wall comes down, the defenses come up, right? When you act like, man, I'm just an imbecile. Can you help me out? Oh, you know, their defenses are completely down, and they start sharing. And I've learned that's what you have to do. Jesus did that. That's kind of what we call the Socratic method, is that you basically you lead people where you want the conversation to go by basically being inferior to them, at least in their mind. But they don't realize you're really controlling the thing. And that's something God has shown me over the years, that it's not about me winning the argument. Huh?
Amen. Amen.
See, if you go in there with the ego that way, you're shot down. You're being very foolish. Because what is it really all about if that's your motive? No, it's not. If you're going in there to win the argument for the sake of yourself, who's it all about? You! However, if you go in there letting them talk and just being led by the Holy Spirit to point them to Jesus, who is it all about then? Absolutely. And He'll win, you see. It's not about me winning or you winning. It's about Him winning. That's important to keep in mind. All right. During those early years of Muhammad's life, he observed what he considered to be a selfish disregard of the poor of Mecca by the wealthy merchants in favor of their own personal interests. And this was real, because they were greedy people. They were just all about money, and they were just taking advantage of people. According to Islamic tradition, one day in 610, how old was he at that time? 40 years of age. When Muhammad was considering the situation of the poor and the wealthy, he had a vision of an angelic being who was supposed to be Gabriel. And this angel is supposed to have said to him, "You are the messenger of God." Okay? Al-Risala. You are the messenger of God. Okay? Thus, from that time until his death in June of 632, how old was he then? 62 years of age. Muhammad reportedly received messages at various times from Gabriel, and the messages that were written down were gathered together in 650 and formed what is called the Quran. Now we're going to look, as we say, tomorrow night in particular and Saturday at what these things are and see some very fascinating things. Therefore, according to Muslims, the Quran contains the very words of God. There's another body of literature, as we mentioned earlier, called the Hadith, which contain his sayings and observations and the history of his life and actions. Now, these sayings, which we will look at later, are not considered on the same level of inspiration as the Quran, but they are considered authoritative as far as guidelines for everyday life, business, marriage, education, etc. Let me give you an example. If you go, you can go online, and if you go online, you can put on your favorite list a thing of the Quran where that you can go there and look at verses and type in a search, verses. Same thing for the Hadith. You can do the same thing. You go online there and type in the Hadith, and you'll go to the different sources and find one that you can put it there as a favorite, and you go and look up any verses you want to. And you know how you do it like a regular Bible program. They have that. And you can order some, pay a lot of money for them, but if you just don't want to spend the money, you can just go on the internet and do that. If you do that, go in there and type in for Hadith the word urinate. Now you say, Justin, are you gross or something or what? No. You will be surprised at the number of references about urination. Now that seems odd to us, but because these people were very just backward, ignorant people, they peed everywhere. And so there are comments he would make about when you're to urinate, when you're not to urinate. That's what the Hadith is about, all right? No, it really is. I'm telling you, it's not just about urination. It's about, that it includes that. But I'm just using that as an example because someone told me that. I didn't want to, really. So I typed in urinate, and I found all of these references about urination and how and where and so forth and so on. And but that's what the Hadith is about. It's just their practical everyday living. It's not considered to be the inspired, like the Quran was and all that. But this is just things. And there are quite a number of Hadiths. Some of them are not very good and so forth. But that's what the Bukhara is probably the most famous and most authoritative for most Muslims. Right? The spread of Islam by Muhammad was carried out by use of the sword, period. And this is a reality, folks, that only a Muslim who's an absolute liar would deny this. The one word that would characterize this spread would be razzias, or raids. And these were supposed to be guided by Allah. And without going into all the details and the minutiae of the early years of their raids and their raiding, their fight against the different Arab tribes and the different caravans and so forth, he was run out of Mecca to Medina. And he used Medina as his base of operation. And from there, he eventually overtook the Meccans and had this victory and so forth. But then they were very arrogant. They thought Allah was in, boom, they got beat real bad and a couple of times. But he gained the support. Now, he gained the support of the people, you must understand, through threat, intimidation, and through assassination. That's how he did it. It's clear. Okay? These raids included massacres, assassinations, as well as outreaches to the poorest of the Arabs. This man was a smart guy. He was like the Hitlers. He was like the other people. The poor people who had nothing, he would raid and kill the merchants and then get their things and give it to them. And what are they going to do for him? Absolutely. They're going to be totally sold out to him. They're going to be faithful to him. Adolf Hitler, who were the people that were the most loyal to him? Anybody know? The perverts, the losers, the people that he took off the streets who were nothing, and he put them in positions of authority, and they became incredibly ruthless. The SS was made up of people like that. These weren't stupid people, many of them, but many of them were just ruthless people. And that's in essence what Muhammad did. This is what he did. The massacres and the assassinations, when you go and read the history, and again, we don't have time to get into all of that in great detail. This is a kind of a cursory overview of all this. But this is no secret. I mean, you can go into any history book. You can go on the internet. You can look and you can read authoritative scholarly stuff on this. And I encourage you to do so. This is not, folks, this is all this seminar is this weekend is a pump primer. You know what a pump primer is? When I was younger, you'd run out of gas or something, you'd take a carburetor off of the air filter, rather, off your carburetor, pour a little gas, and, because you put gas in the tank and it was an air bubble, right? So you had to pour the gas down the carburetor a little bit and break that bubble, and that was kind of priming the pump. I had family that lived out in the country in Mississippi when I was growing up. And this one aunt lived out in the country, and they didn't have running water. They had a pump there by her sink. And every night, my aunt would take a bowl of water, or she'd take a little bowl, pump water in it, and put it there. Why did she do that? For in the morning, to do what? Prime the pump. Pour that water down there, break the air, boom, get the water coming up. This is a pump priming seminar. We're not giving you all the information in the world about Islam, but we're giving you the basic facts. Are you with me? To stir your interest, to get you going, to realize, man, this is something I need to get involved in myself. All right. But this is what Islam is about. This is, in essence, what the Pope made comment about, that 13th century Byzantine emperor who made a statement of truth, but the Muslims can't handle the truth. Here's what you need to be aware of. Muslims cannot handle the truth. They have been raised in a mindset where you never question mullah, because especially the Shiites, they consider them as being manifestations of God. You never question a mullah, you never question the prophet, you never question, you accept it wholeheartedly. That's why when they say go kill somebody, they do it. Are you with me? It is a brainwashed religious system. It is demonic to the core, to the core. And you've got to understand that. But you've got to be wise in dealing with a Muslim. You don't come up and say, you're a stupid imbecile for believing that. What's he going to do? The conversation is over right there. Are you with me? You've got to be patient, but you've got to stand for the truth, and they've got to know that. You've got to do that. You can't be, wishy-washy and mealy-mouthed in this thing. All right. However, the following quote puts in ultimate perspective the philosophy of Muhammad and that of Islam. In 632, Muhammad made his last visit to Mecca, and his speech there has been recorded in the traditional writings as the final statement of his message. Know that every Muslim is a Muslim's brother, and that the Muslims are brethren. Fighting between them should be avoided, and the bloodshed in pagan times should not be avenged. Muslims should fight what? What does that say?
All men.
Muslims should fight all men until they say, there is not God but a God. La ilaha illallah. There is no God but Allah. Okay? Now, folks, Muslims should fight all men until they say. Do you understand this is the essence of it? Jesus says, go out and preach the gospel. They say, go out and fight all men. You force, intimidate, coerce. Are you with me? You see, we think, why are they like this? Folks, you understand. Comparing Islam to Christianity is like comparing steaks to oranges. Huh? It doesn't even match, you know.
Steaks to chicken, fried cow pie.
Well, that's true, yeah. It just doesn't fit. There's no coalescing of the two. Are you with me? We're talking about completely we're talking about different planets as far as reasoning. That's what you have got to understand. That is so absolutely essential in our dealing with this. The spread of Islam was based on threat and intimidation, and today the exact same method is used to force people into submission to their authority and belief where they are in power. And this use of threat and intimidation is especially true for any Muslim who might commit his or her life to Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. This is truth. That's why I'm going to write. I would encourage all of you to write this Muslim guy just respectfully, call him, and just say, sir, what about in these countries where Christians are being killed? Will you go there and speak to the Indonesian Muslims? Will you go and speak to the Saudi Arabia leaders and say, when you start letting Christians come in there and carry their Bibles and build their churches, then I will respect you. Are you with me? Don't be bashful about that. Oh, I can't say that. Don't do that anymore. We don't have time for those silly, childish games. Are you with me? We need to take a stand. Ladies, you don't have to be fearful and cower. That guy's on another phone line. You don't have to, but you can write and call. Men, take a stand. But use wisdom. Use wisdom. Well, the time for playing church is over. We don't have time to play that anymore. Okay. So I never forget when I was at the Bible college, there was a young girl there from Pakistan. And she had gotten saved. And she told her mother, but didn't she tell her dad? Her dad was wanting to ship her back to Pakistan because he had a prearranged marriage. She met a young man there at the Bible college. They fell in love and ultimately got married. But one day she finally told her dad, I'm going to a Bible college. He said, what? And she says, because I've become a Christian. I said, you're going to Pakistan. Well, he couldn't. She was 21 years old. But she told us this. She says, if I go back to Pakistan, I will be forced to marry this man, and if I do not recant my faith in Jesus, they'll kill me. So she never did go back. She ended up marrying this other young man. They live in Dallas, Texas now. Go to Calvary Chapel, Dallas, there, Rick Coburn. But that's the truth, folks. And what was so neat to me is when that guy in Afghanistan who came to Christ and came back there for his family, and how many of you remember reading that in the newspaper about a year and a half ago, or last year sometime? And the Muslims, we ought to tear him to pieces because he became a Christian, you see. Religion of peace. They're much of religion of peace as I am a Marxist, okay? And I'm anything but that. But this is what you need to understand. This is what's going on, and you need to confront it here with Muslims right now today in our own country. On the other hand, from a cultural perspective, Muhammad's primary contribution is that he combined together a union of Arab tribes that, after his death, resulted in the ultimate creation of an Arab and Islamic empire stretching from North Africa to Iran. And Islam became the glue that held that empire together. From that empire created some 1,300 years ago, we are today facing the same philosophy of violence, threat, and brutality that was the cornerstone of Islam's spread with Muhammad and subsequently with that of his followers as well, long ages after him. You see, this is what the Muslims got upset about because this Byzantine emperor made this comment. What he said was truth. It's what we see today. They can't handle the truth, but don't be coerced, don't be intimidated. You know, you stand and speak it. They're ignorant people. They're blinded people. They're people that are so insecure they can't handle the truth. You are dealing with demonic, satanic bondage like we've never dealt with before. People who've raised, like Dr. Kamel, who said that in our church, that came to talk about, you know, not without my daughter, and he made that comment, the greatest threat to Western civilization is radical Islam. He knew exactly what he was talking about, and he was exactly correct. One very important passage to take note of is Galatians 1, 6 through 9. And we're going to finish up with this tonight. I'm going to show you something about this really important. Paul writes, I am amazed that you are so quickly deserting him who called you by the grace of Christ for a different gospel, which is really not another. Only there are some who are disturbing you and want to distort the gospel of Christ. But even though we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to that which we have preached to you, let him be accursed. As we have said before, so I say again now, if any man is preaching to you a gospel contrary to that which you received, let him be accursed. Two words here I want us to look at. The first one is the word different. Now, when you read this in English, called you by the grace of Christ for a different gospel, which is really not another. The word another right there. That really doesn't make sense to us in English, does it? Different, another, well, it's different, but it's not another. What does that mean? Am I right? How many of you does that make sense to? How many of you doesn't make sense? How many of you don't know whether it makes sense or not? How many of you are going to say it? All right. The word for different there in verse 6, all right? This word right here, what he's saying here, I'm amazed that you're so quickly deserting him who called you by the grace of God for a different gospel. This word in the Greek is this word right here, heteros, which means of a different species. Heteros here means of a different species, okay? And then he goes on into verse 7, and he says, which is really not another. How many of you have a King James Bible? Who has King James? Read what it says there in verse 6 and 7. Just read verses 6 and 7.
I marvel that ye are so soon removed from him that called you into the grace of God, Christ into another gospel, which is not another, but there be that
okay. So he says another gospel, which is not another. And you say, what does that? It doesn't make sense, does it? But now it will make sense. The word for another, there in verse 7, is this word in Greek. Same species. All right? So, let me just read what he's saying to you. I am amazed that you are so quickly deserting him who called you by the grace of Christ for a heteros gospel, which is really not allos. Only there are some who are disturbing you and want to distort the gospel of Christ. Two different words. Let me translate it. I'm amazed that you are so quickly deserting him who called you by the grace of God for a different species of gospel, which is really not the same species. Does that make better sense? Let me give you an example. If I look at, let's just use this thing right here, this marker. And I would say this marker is a heteros object from me. I'm an object, right? And this is an object, but it's a heteros object, right? Completely different species. On the other hand, if I look at Rocky down here, and I say Rocky is an allos object. Same species. He's better looking than I am, and and all that. But we're of the same species. We're allos, okay? We're both men, right? But he's nicer looking, smarter, and everything than I am. But here we are, same species. Now, here's what we're talking about. Heteros here is what Muhammad is. Not even of the same species, and we're going to see that in greater depth. I don't have any doubt that he had a revelation. I don't doubt that Joseph Smith had a revelation. When you peel back a lot of the veneer from Islam and Mormonism, you find there's an incredible amount of similarity. Islam, of course, is pure violence. Mormons are not that, but the same deception. This, on the other hand, is allos. Now, folks, what we need to be concerned about is this, not this. We don't need to be concerned about minor things that don't have anything to do with the ultimate question of salvation by grace through faith. Somebody dips, somebody pours, somebody immerses. So what? Somebody, they have communion, trans-con, memorial. Listen, did you know, how many of you knew that John Huss, who died after John Wycliffe, still believed in transubstantiation? Did you know that? Now, John Wycliffe did not. He stood against it, but did you know that John Wycliffe believed in purgatory? How many of you knew that? But I know both those men are men of God. But what Huss was taking a stand against is the Pope is not the final authority. He believed, Huss was probably kind of more moderate. He wasn't as strong with that, but he was more kind of like Luther. But that came 100 years later. But the point I'm making to you is this. They were men of God, but they were taking a stand against the corruption of the Catholic Church. Now, I know that that's not the body and blood of Jesus. I know that. But you know what? I've been with Catholics who have a saving faith in Jesus Christ. And who they look at that and they've taught, and as you talk with them, they begin to realize that. But you know what? Their salvation is based upon their faith in Jesus, not taking that wafer and thinking it becomes his body. So the point I'm making to you, I'm not saying that doctrine is not important. It's very important, but we need to focus on the major on the majors and minor on the minors. Are you with me? Because there are Catholics who are brothers in Christ, and there are people in Calvary Chapel that aren't. There are Southern Baptists who have a faith in Jesus Christ, and Presbyterians who don't. There are Presbyterians who know Jesus Christ, and Methodists that don't. Are you with me? So the point I'm trying to make is this. The allos here, we have different Christian denominations. We cross our T's, dot our I's. From Roman Catholics to Eastern Orthodox to Presbyterians to Pentecostals to Assemblies of God to Southern Baptists to Presbyterians to Methodists to Nazarene to holiness to whatever, okay? But we are all here in this allos, and we may do things a little bit differently. But we're preaching the same Jesus. Now, within this, of course, you're going to have, in this group, ultimately you're going to have this. Who are going to come and pervert it. Like we see with the Metropolitan Church, right? The homosexual thing. Like you see with some cults that come in, and you have to be aware. When the basic fundamental truths of the deity of Jesus, the authority, his virgin birth, the sinfulness of man, eternal, separation from God and hell, those are fundamental truths. When you see somebody who comes in, tries to come in under the umbrella of this, but begins to deny those fundamental truths, then they are, in turn, that. And so what we're going to do tomorrow night, we're going to look at some of the heresies in the early church and how the Muslims have embraced that and some other things. But this is what Paul is saying, you see. And Islam is not the same. It's not just a different perspective. It is absolutely antithetical to everything that is in the Bible. And the basic fundamental truths that bring us to a saving faith and relationship with Jesus, these are the things that we must take a stand on and know why we believe them and how they set us free. So, anybody have any questions before we, yes ma'am. And tell me your name.
My name is Tara, and I wanted to know if does antithetical mean in direct opposition?
Absolutely. No, it's very good, Dora. That's what it means. Antithetical means anti-theory. It's a complete different theory, completely different perspective. Absolutely. Good question. Yes, sir. And your name?
Sam,
Brother Sam?
what's the difference between the Quran, Q-U-R-A-N, and the Quran?
No difference.
Why did they change?
It's just the way the people spell it. The Arabic letter, the kaf. Some people spell it with a K, some people spell it with a Q. It's no difference, it's the same thing. Brother Sam, pronounce D-O-G.
Dog?
Now you know how I say it? Dog. Now I can say dog, but that sounds so weird for me to say that. It's a dog. Now, Brother David, pronounce O-N, like this thing is O-N the table. No, come on. Say it again. On. Now I say on. See, I say this pen is on the table, and this is my own shirt. It's on and on. Anyway, but that's kind of really all it is. It's just the Arabic letters and how you pronounce the vowel sounds, ko versus q. That's all it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just lately you see more of the Q. Even on TV.
Because that's quite honestly, that's when you read it in Arabic, that's basically how really it should be pronounced. It's more the Quran versus the Quran. That's all it is. It's just nothing more than that. Same thing in Hebrew with some of the Hebrew letters and the way people transliterate the Hebrew, certain vowel signs and all that. And so that's basically all it is. But that's an excellent question. But there's no difference. It's the same book, just a little bit different way in spelling. And yes, sir. Name again?
Bill Thomas.
Brother Bill.
The Sunni accept the hadith.
We're going to get into that. I don't want to get too. We're going to. So we just got now into his birth. We're going to talk about his death and the difference between the Sunnis and the Shiites and all that. We're going to get into that. Yes, Megan.
What is the difference? Well, the Muslims kind of put themselves in different columns or whatever. The Muslims that say they're not the same as the ones that go and kill. You know what I'm talking about? Like they
Well, yeah, you have some of the moderate Muslims, what we call cultural Muslims, and you've got the others. And we're going to get into that more Saturday. But that is a very important question. Why? What is that difference? I mean, we're going to kind of sum up everything. And you have a lot of Muslims that are cultural Muslims. But the ones who embrace the Quran for what it is, they're the ones who do this. Because we're going to see, just as we showed you that one quote, Muslims should fight all men until they say there is not a God but God. A lot of Muslims don't know this. I'm going to show you some things in the Quran that many Muslims have never read. Now, they're Muslim scholars who know, but I know a lot more than a lot of Muslims in this country do about the Quran, quite frankly. And when I talk with them and I share things, it's just like with Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons or anybody like that. By the way, let me give you an incredible website for Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. I'll do it for you up here. It's this. This young lady just got married last summer. She's going to have a baby in May next year. She got married in May. She's having a baby in May. That's what it is, yeah. WhitForJesus.org. Has nothing to do with Islam, but I just thought about sharing with Muslims and JW. So, but yeah, we're going to get into that. Your radical Muslims are killing Muslims. They are killing everybody. They are very vicious, animalistic people. Any other questions, though? Yes, ma'am. And your name?
Vicki?
Miss Vicki.
I've been reading about the 12th Imam.
We're going to get into that too.
Okay, good. I just wanted to ask.
That's in the Shiite branch, not the Sunni branch, but the Shiite, yes.
Sir, don't the moderate Muslims cease to be moderate once they come in contact with the radical?
Yeah, your moderate Muslims are just people who are Muslim in name. They're cultural Muslims, I call them. And they're the ones who are there, but they're afraid to speak out. We'll talk more about that. We'll get into that. Anybody else on stuff we've talked about tonight? Yes.
I wonder, when you talked about the people that send, like you said, the higher up people, they send the guys out for
The mullahs, yes.
Do the people above them, do they know better? Like you said, you don't see them out there doing it. Are they doing it because they believe that's what they should do?
Yeah, because they want power and control. Listen, Akhmina Dajjab is just, he's a puppet of the mullahs who are really ruling that country of Iran. It's a power game. It's all about power and rule. Why do you think they're chumming up to Kim Jong-il and Hugo Chavez? I mean, they're manipulators, they're users. They'll use anybody to get their ends.
But if they believe that they're going, they say, don't kill yourself because you're going to land in heaven and peace from God, why don't they think they should go do it too?
Because they're intimidated people. The Shiites especially see those mullahs as expressions of God, and they don't question them. I mean, that's just, they do what they do. The Sunnis the same, and somewhat the Sunnis as well, but they're controlled, they're manipulated. It's cultic. It is a personality. Ma'am, what is your name? Karen, it's a cult. Why do you think the people did what Jim Jones did down in Ghana? Huh? See, I mean, it's demonic, hellish, satanic. Same thing with Hitler. Why did those people do what Hitler did? I mean, it's demonic. We don't comprehend that because of the freedom we have in Jesus, the truth. But when you live in that kind of fear and intimidation, that's your whole life in existence. And they're taught that from little bitty. I would just encourage any of you get that movie, Not Without My Daughter. That's one of the greatest exposés on the true face of Islam that I know of. And also, I'm going to ask Rocky, I haven't done it yet, but I'm looking for him on Saturday. I want him to share some of his experiences. Would you be willing to do that?
No pressure.
Yeah.
I'll be working.
Pain and agony. Saturday afternoon you will be? What about tomorrow night? Tomorrow night you going to be working? What about Saturday morning? Huh? Good. Okay, we'll do it Saturday morning. I'll let you do that then. Because I want him to share some of this stuff. He's been over and seen it. Yes, sir. And your name again, sir?
Rob.
Brother Rob.
I'm just wondering, with all these raids and the tribal situations with Mohammed, that was a tribal Arabic kind of
Oh, absolutely.
thing going on. Is there anything in the Quran or back in Muhammad's day where they encountered the Jews?
Oh, yes, sir.
When did that come in?
That came in, he massacred a whole Jewish village at one point. Slaughtered, to kill all the men, spared the women for themselves. Killed all the men, every one of them. And out of punishment. I mean, just slaughtered them as a massacre.
And likewise, is there any reference to any Christians during his?
Oh, yes, he killed them too. He killed anybody and everybody that stood in his way. He became very vehement against the Christians because they opposed him at one point. You see all these changes that take, and these revelations correspond to what he's seeing happening out there. It's very convenient. There are a lot of convenient things in there that we'll show you. But I just say, yeah, what we're giving you is a cursory overview. And I'll get into a little bit more of that tomorrow evening, as we see some of that and just the result of that, especially. Yes?
Is there any books you can purchase through a Christian bookstore that go further into Islam and explain?
Oh, they're all. Who showed me that book about Islam Unveiled by the folks, the two gentlemen?
Unveiling Islam.
Unveiling Islam is one of the best books out there. This guy, I think, president of Liberty University there in But there are a number of really good, there it is right there, Unveiling Islam right there. That's an excellent book. Another source I would tell you is a guy named Robert Morey. Faith Defenders is his website. He has some stuff out there. But there are a lot of excellent books. I saw one at a Christian bookstore in Colorado Springs the other day about this gentleman who's an Iranian. But I'll give you some books. I'll put a list of them up here probably Saturday for you to check out. Some good sources on that. Okay, one more question. Yes, sir. And your name is?
Andy Beckman.
Brother Andy.
I was wondering after Saturday if your presentation will be you'll make a copy for that.
Sure, I'll make it, you know, if anybody wants to transcribe it, I don't know how you do that. What would you do?
We're going to have the recording.
Oh, the recording. You want the recording or written down?
Just the file that you have with your presentation.
Yeah, I don't know how.
Put that on the website or something.
How would you do that?
We can,
We can burn the PowerPoint on CDs.
Good, just burn it. Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah. We'll take care of that. We'll have that burn on there for you, and we'll do that. Okay. Brother Matt, you're the man.